Hi, I'm Andy, and this is my lesson on traversing arrays in Java. In this lesson, I'll show you how to use a for loop to populate an array and to print its contents. Let's get started. In this program, we first want to ask the user to enter some numbers. We'll put those numbers into an array and then print them out. When you create an array, you need to indicate its size. So the first thing we need to do is ask the user to tell us how many numbers they want to enter. Now we need to create the array and populate it with numbers from the user. That task requires quite a few lines of code, so it makes sense to separate it out into its own method. We'll call that method createArray. It will be passed one argument, the size of the array it needs to create. This method will return the address to the array it creates. We need to use an assignment operator to copy that address into an array reference variable. Lastly, we need to print the entire array. Again, we'll do that in a separate method. That method will be called printArray and will be passed just one argument, a reference to the array we want to print. We want to print the array that just got created. It won't return any info, so we don't need an assignment operator here. Okay, let's get out of our main method so we can write the code for these two new methods. We'll start with createArray. That method needs to be static because we're calling it from a static method and will therefore be calling it on the class itself, not an object of the class. The method returns a reference to an integer array. It's called createArray and has one formal parameter, array length. The method body first needs to create an array of the proper length. Then it needs to repeatedly ask the user to enter a number, and then it needs to put that number into the array. This process must repeat until all the array slots have been filled. Since we'll be repeating some code a predetermined number of times, we'll want to use a for loop here. We'll call our loop variable I since it will stand for the array index we are currently filling in. I will start at 0, the first index we need to fill in. We want this loop to access each location within the array and place a number there. Using a loop to visit each location within an array is called traversing the array, or iterating over the array. To traverse the array, the loop needs to repeat until I is bigger than the last index in the array. That means we want the loop to continue while I is less than or equal to the last array index. Since array indexes always start at 0, the last array index for any array is the array's length minus 1. So we can either put I less than or equal to array length minus 1, or I less than array length. The two expressions are equivalent, but the second requires a little less typing, so that's the one I usually prefer. Also, we typically don't have a variable containing the array's length like we do in this case. So usually when we traverse an array, you'll want to use the dot operator to grab the length property from the array, like this. After each time through the loop body, we need to move to the next slot in the array. We do that by incrementing I by 1. Now, in the for loop body, we need to first ask the user to enter a number and then convert that input to an integer. Then we'll put that number into the array at slot I. And that's it for the for loop. After the for loop has done its job, we simply need to return the reference to the array we just built. Let's move on to the print array method. That method will be public and static and will not return anything. And it needs to be passed one bit of information, the array that needs to be printed. Let's use this array as an example. In the method body, we need to print each array element. Let's print it out in this format. We'll do that by traversing the array with a for loop. Just like before, I will stand for the array index. It needs to start at 0, and the loop will continue while I is less than the array's length. As you can see here, the loop needs to print the number at index I, followed by a comma. Since we want the numbers to all be on one line, we need to use the print method rather than print line. Notice this will work for all the elements in the array except the last one. For that one, we don't want to print a comma after printing the number. To handle that case, let's stop the for loop before it reaches that last element. And then after the loop, we'll print the last number. We'll use print line here to move our console cursor down to the next line after printing all the numbers. So that should do it. Let's go ahead and test our program. Good, so that worked well. Before we go, let me show you one last thing. Up here in main, let's comment out our call to the print array method. Instead, let's try to print the array by simply passing the array's reference in a print line statement, like this. Okay, let's run the program again. So instead of the contents of the array, the print line printed this weird looking text. That's because arrays are objects, and when you print an object, the object's toString method is automatically invoked. By default, the string produced by the toString method contains the object's information in this format. First, it shows what type of object it is. This symbol means our object is an integer array. Then it has an @ sign, followed by this text here, which is called the object's hash code. The hash code is not something you need to worry about understanding at this point. The bottom line is that when you print an object, whether it's an array or an instance of a class, and it doesn't have a toString method explicitly defined for it, you get this rather unhelpful text as output. That means, unfortunately, you can't print an array's contents by simply passing the array's reference in a print line statement. And that wraps up this lesson on traversing arrays in Java. I'm Andy. Thanks for watching and coding with me today.